Bonesetter's Daughter is the fourth novel by Amy Tan, an American author whose family emigrated from China in the 20th century. Tan's book follows the life of three women: Ruth Liu Xin, her mother Luling, and her mother Liu Xin. Although told in a non-linear fashion, in this video I will retell the events from the three women's lives in chronological order. Liu Xin, otherwise known as Baobou Mu or Precious Auntie, originally hails from a place known as Mouth on the Mountain, a village to the southwest of Beijing. Due to her mother and brother's untimely deaths, Liu Xin is an only child and indulged by her widowed father, a well-known specialist in healing people's broken bones. Liu Xin is therefore the eponymous Bonesetter's daughter, after whom the book is named. Liu Xin is taught to read and write and afforded many other privileges that most young girls in China would not have had access to during the late 19th century. She also learns of the hiding place of what are alleged to be dragon bones, otherwise known as oracle bones. These are crushed into dust and used in traditional Chinese medicine and then sold for high prices. She grows into a clever, confident and beautiful young woman who catches the eye of two local men. One is called Chang, a coffin maker, and the other Liu Xin, otherwise known as baby uncle of the Liu family. Liu Xin refuses to marry Chang, and instead opts to wed baby uncle, whom she loves and has slept with in the lead up to their wedding. Chang, a proud and callous man, vows revenge, and during the day of the ceremony, he and another man pose as bandits and stage a robbery of the wedding party. Not only do they steal a valuable amount of dragon bones, but Liu Xin's father and prospective husband are both killed in the process of the heist. Although not officially married to baby uncle, the Liu family agrees to take Liu Xin into their household on the advice of Great Granny, the family matriarch. However, she is overcome with grief and anger, particularly when she sees Chang again, who is above suspicion and has hence gotten away with murder. Unable to deal with her sadness, Liu Xin goes into the Liu family's ink-making workshop and drinks resin in an attempt to kill herself. But her suicide fails, and instead leaves her badly disfigured and unable to talk. In the weeks that follow, it becomes apparent that Liu Xin is pregnant. This cements her stay in the household, as it is baby uncle's child. In order to avoid a scandal due to the child being a bastard, Great Granny arranges that her eldest son's family will pretend the baby is theirs. Liu Xin is to stay, but will pose as a nurse for the baby. Her disfigurement will be linked to a monastery fire. It is at this point that Liu Xin becomes Baobou Mu or Precious Auntie. Luling, Liu Xin's daughter, has grown up assuming that her aunt is her real mother. Yet she is confused as to why she is different in stature from Ling, her sister, and her brother. She also notes how their mother seems to favour Ling, even when Luling is the older sibling. Luling is undoubtedly closer to her nurse, Precious Auntie, who dotes on her and communicates through sign language and basic sounds. Luling seems unbothered by Precious Auntie's appearance and is enchanted by Precious Auntie's knowledge of dragon bones and their whereabouts in the surrounding hills. We learn that the Liu family's ink is famous and well respected throughout Beijing. Much of this is down to Precious Auntie's talent for calligraphy, which they put to use when advertising the ink in shop windows. During Luling's teenage years, Western scientists arrive in the area to excavate bones from the surrounding hills. They discover the remains of human beings from roughly 1 million years ago, which comes to be known as the Peking man specimens. Chang, who still has the supposed dragon bones he stole from Precious Auntie's father, offers them to the scientists in order to claim a possible reward. The bones are indeed of early humans, and this makes the Chang family rich and famous around Beijing. Great Granny dies, and Luling's supposed mother begins making plans to have her married and moved on. Luling is sent to Beijing to meet a potential suitor. Whilst in Beijing, Luling marvels at the big city, walking all over, much to the dismay of her elderly chaperone. It transpires that the family Luling is being offered to is that of Chang, the coffin maker with his fourth son in need of a wife. It is implied to the reader that Chang wants Luling to lead him to the other human remains that lie near their hometown, hence his willingness to accept her as daughter-in-law. Unaware of this, Luling is flattered to become part of such a prosperous and prominent family. Her return to the countryside and Precious Auntie fills her with feelings of inadequacy and shame, as she realises for the first time how unattractive her hometown and nursemaid are. When Precious Auntie discovers which family Luling is arranged to be married into, she furiously begins writing page after page of memoir without explanation. Luling's growing independence means she feels increasingly repelled by her nurse's usual affection, and when presented with Precious Auntie's memoir, she refuses to read past the part that insults Chang. As such, she does not learn who Precious Auntie really is until it's too late. In a desperate bid to prevent the marriage, Precious Auntie kills herself, having sent a letter to the Changs threatening to haunt them should the marriage go ahead. Luling finally reads Precious Auntie's story and learns who her mother truly was. Filled with remorse, she attempts to find the body in the ravine behind the compound, where it has been unceremoniously placed. But Luling is unable to find her mother's final resting place. With the embarrassment caused by Precious Auntie, downturn in family finances, and long-term desire to remove Luling, Gowling's mother arranges for Luling to be sent to a local orphanage. Although only cousins, Gowling insists that they will always be sisters. Luling is sent to a local orphanage and takes up a post as a tutor thanks to her reading and writing skills. She also shares the grounds with scientists working on the Peking Man excavation. A letter eventually arrives from Gowling, explaining that she has been married off to Chang's youngest son instead of Luling. Gowling is unhappy with her life owing to Funan's opium addiction and his general mistreatment of her as a wife. In the meantime, Luling meets and falls in love with the geologist Kai Jing. As their relationship blossoms, the Japanese invade China as part of their involvement in World War II. Gowling escapes from Funan's clutches and comes to live at the orphanage with Luling. Later, Luling and Kai Jing are married, much to the delight of everyone in attendance. However, their happiness is fleeting. Kai Jing is forced to join the Communist Army, and although allowed to return after a while, he and the other men are eventually seized by Japanese troops and executed. Luling sees that the other girls need her support, and she resolves to pull herself through her mourning for Kai Jing in order to help them flee the orphanage and reach Beijing. Luling, Gowling, and others from the orphanage escape and begin living in the family's Beijing ink shop that now belongs to the Chang family. An opportunity to move to the United States arises, and it is decided that Gowling will be the one to go, in order to escape her opium-addicted husband. Gowling promises to sponsor Luling's entrance to the US as soon as she becomes a US citizen. Luling moves to Hong Kong to wait for her sister's assistance, but both sisters find their new homes hard to contend with. Luling notes that inflation has made whatever money she makes nearly worthless, and she is therefore unable to return to Beijing. Thankfully, she finds a job with a British mother and daughter, from whom she learns English and saves her wages. In time, Gowling is able to arrange for Luling to travel to San Francisco, posing as a visiting artist. Luling sells an oracle bone that Precious Auntie once gave her and secures safe passage to the US by boat. After moving to San Francisco, Gowling and Luling marry a pair of brothers. Gowling marries Edmund Young, and Luling marries Edwin Young. They never tell their husbands that they have been married before and attempt to put the past behind them. Edwin and Luling have a baby, whom they call Ruth Lu Yi Young. But tragically, when Ruth is 2 years old, Edwin is killed in a hit-and-run accident. Luling is left a single parent in a foreign country. The earliest memory we get from Ruth is one where she badly injures herself in the school playground. She avoids talking due to the amount of concern and attention she receives from her mother and classmates. Her mother provides her with a sand table and chopstick to communicate with. One night, her mother becomes confused and convinces herself that Ruth is channeling the spirit of Precious Auntie. Luling begs Precious Auntie to forgive her and lift the curse that has followed Luling around ever since her death. Ruth writes what she thinks her mother wants to hear and reassures her that she is forgiven and that there is no curse. This belief that Ruth can channel Precious Auntie is a recurring aspect in their time living together. When Ruth is 11, she and Luling are renting a bungalow from a couple named Dottie and Lance. Ruth has a crush on Lance, and when they invite her to watch The Wizard of Oz on their colour TV set, she enthusiastically attends. Whilst at their house, she uses the bathroom and sits on the toilet seat that is covered with Lance's fresh urine. Ruth, having received some inaccurate information on how women get pregnant, now believes she's carrying Lance's child. This causes the already tumultuous couple to break up, and Lance to act aggressive towards the terrified Ruth. Ruth pretends to channel Precious Auntie and convinces her mother that they must move to Land's End, hence escaping Lance's anger. As a teenager, Ruth keeps a diary that Luling continues to read against her wishes. During a period of intense argument between the two, Ruth writes that she wishes her mother would finally commit suicide instead of constantly threatening to. Knowing that her mother will read it, she hides the diary in a relatively conspicuous place. After school the next day, her auntie Gao Ling informs her that her mother has supposedly fallen out of a window and is recovering in hospital. Ruth is filled with guilt and tends to her mother until she is well again. For her birthday, Luling gives Ruth a gold ring and a photo of her real mother. Ruth is infatuated with the ring and does not notice that the photo is in fact Precious Auntie. This admission by her mother is in spite of the deep shame she has of being born outside of wedlock. Yet her young daughter will not come to understand this until later in life. In adulthood, Ruth has become a successful ghostwriter. She works with other authors, usually those in the self-help genre, in order to develop their final publication. During a yoga class, she meets Art, a linguistics academic who she assumes to be gay. She befriends him, and they become close, meeting for coffee on a weekly basis. When she discovers that he is in fact divorced with 2 children, they quickly fall into a relationship and move in together. The beginning of the novel finds Ruth and Art 10 years into their relationship, unmarried and in something of a rut. Ruth has grown disillusioned with her ghostwriting job and fears that her mother, Luling, is slowly losing her mind. She is also in the process of translating Luling's memoir sentence by sentence with the use of a Chinese dictionary. We also learn that Luling has forgotten the real name of Precious Auntie. During a doctor's checkup, Luling struggles to remember certain things correctly, which leads Dr. Huey to conclude that she has Alzheimer's. Ruth despairs at the diagnosis, and things become worse during a Lunar New Year dinner, as Luling denies Gao Ling is her real sister, and that her real mother was Bao Bo Mu, Precious Auntie. She holds up an old photo of Precious Auntie to prove this, yet Ruth fails to recall it from her childhood experience. Although true, Ruth sees this as yet another symptom of the Alzheimer's and her mother's growing confusion. With her mother's condition worrying her, Ruth cancels a holiday with Art to Hawaii, saying he should travel without her. Their relationship seems more strained than ever, which is made worse by Ruth's decision to move in with her mother. Ruth seeks out Auntie Gao Ling's help in order to balance her job and care for her mother. Whilst Luling is with Gao-ling, Ruth endeavours to clean her mother's house of unnecessary items. Amongst the bills, crockery and other bits and bobs, she comes across the gold ring and photo of Precious Auntie that Luling had presented Ruth with during her teenage birthday. Ruth begins to question whether her mother is actually as confused as she once thought. Meanwhile, she also uncovers another memoir, which seems more updated than the one she is currently deciphering. Ruth resolves to have the new memoir translated as soon as possible so that she can understand more about her mother. With Ruth being away from Art for so long, he and his daughters have come to value her presence much more. They visit her at Luling's house at every opportunity and beg her to return when she can. The translator of the memoir, Mr. Tang, calls Ruth to explain that he finds her mother's story captivating and that she is an incredible woman. Art comes up with a way to support Luling as well as alleviate some of the pressure on Ruth. They devise a way to trick Luling into moving to a state-of-the-art retirement home, as they know she will be too proud to leave her house and sense of independence. Art, Ruth, Luling, and Mr. Tang visit an Asian art museum where they come across an exhibition housing an oracle bone. Luling talks about her grandfather, the Bonesetter, and suddenly remembers that her mother was called Liu Xin. Ruth has her doubts, however, as Gu means bone in Chinese, and she assumes that her mother is misremembering things. Later that day, Art acknowledges the role that Ruth plays in his life by asking her to marry him. Auntie Gao-ling also confirms that Precious Auntie's name was in fact Liu Xin, a slightly different pronunciation from the one her mother had remembered earlier. The end of the story sees Ruth feeling free and satisfied with life, having connected with her past and grown closer to her mother. She begins writing her very own book, a story that is for herself, her mother, and her grandmother.